What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Grown Man Sessions. I'm your host, Timothy Rhyme. This podcast was created to try to empower young men for generations to come. That's the goal. We are going to be having conversations with grown men about their struggles and the things that they're going through in life so that we could possibly learn from them and take away the gems. And without further ado, let's get this thing going. So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Paul Willis. Paul is from Boston, but he currently resides in Sacramento, California, which is my hometown. He's a hip hop and spoken word artist. He's a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. He's on the executive board at the Soul Collective. Yeah, I think there's another one, right?
Yeah, a new nonprofit to the area called Rebel Ventures Network. We're a kind of youth development, youth leadership nonprofit, working to give them the kind of skills at high school age that they would normally get kind of early stages in their career. So when you think about like project planning and management, strategic partnership, creating a vision, the whole nine, we don't think that youth have to wait to get those skills. We can give it to them early.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm originally from Sacramento. I live in LA now, but I came up through, I don't know if you're familiar with La Familia Counseling Center.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got started there when I was maybe about 13, 14 and just never lost my connection. I still talk to people. Even one of the guys that I interviewed a few days ago, Danny Zavala, he's who I met through La Familia. So I just love the community aspect of things and community building. And I know we're going to get into that, man. But before we do, just tell us a little bit about your journey, man. Tell us about, where you're from, and kind of what got you to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my life is a pretty wild story. But it starts back home in Boston. My grandmother raised me and my brothers and sisters because I was born in 1987. It was like the height of the crack cocaine era. My mom was like super addicted to drugs and alcohol, battled and with that addiction for decades of her life. There was no father's name on my birth certificate, right? So my grandmother stepped up and was like, "I am your mother and your father," which is amazing of her. And she really kind of instilled, certain values, education, giving back to the community. She was Jamaican, so she understands really how important it was to have that knowledge. That knowledge is power, right? And just the community aspect of kind of looking out for people who might be less fortunate than you. And even if you don't have a lot, like your time, your energy, and your care is enough for some people. You know what I mean?
For sure.
That's kind of a little bit about my journey, what kind of brought me here to this point. But a big part of it, man, is like whether it was, hip hop, helping me to build community, or being in education spaces, being focused on social justice. All of those things are part of my values and what brought me to this point.
That's very, very important work that you're doing, my friend. And I give you a lot of respect and, your flowers, man, because, it's not something that a lot of people, tend to, are willing to make certain sacrifices to do that kind of work for over an extended period of time. But I'm just curious, man, like I understand that, your story is pretty rough from the beginning, right? And what kind of led you down the path of saying like, you know what, like I didn't end up like, how I could have ended up, but I'm still going to do what I can to give back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you come from nothing, all you want is like the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I saw, what my mom was going through, I was like, I want the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. When I saw, my brother kind of struggling, in school for a little bit, I said, I want the opposite. When my friends joined gangs, went to jail, all that kind of stuff, I wanted something different. And it wasn't, the opportunities in my life that I've been granted, like those things weren't luck. They were the result of people who were in my life who presented me with, hey, like here's another way, here's a different option. So for me, I wanted to be that person for somebody else, right? I knew that there were kids in my neighborhood, kids who grew up like me all over the country, who didn't have somebody in their life who said, hey, you know what, there's another way to do this. You know, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I never have in my entire life. And that kind of like surprises a lot of people. They're like, wait, you're a rapper or you're this or that, you don't do those things. And I'm like, yeah, because I believe that you can still, you know, be conscious and just not be corny, you know.
For sure.
So that was my kind of drive for the biggest part of my like young adult life was, you know what, there's another way, there's got to be another way. And even if there are a lot of models for me about how to do this, I can be the first, or I can be the person who's just different than, you know, everything else that I've seen. And that's, you know, that's where I'm going to focus my energy and my time.
Yeah, my boy Clean, he said that, you know, he learned along the way that certain things become normal in your life, but they're not natural. And that's what it kind of sounds like. It sounds like you had an inclination from the beginning, though, that you just knew that like this wasn't natural and you didn't want it to be normal for you.
Yeah. And I think that came from my grandma, right? Like, you know, my grandmother had a lot of love for all of us. She like was super big in the church, you know, so while she was a nurse at the children's hospital in her free time, she was like really big and involved in the church community. She's a minister. So for her, it was like, you know, I learned how to read by reading the Bible, you know, growing up. So for us, for a lot of those lessons about like just being conscientious of others, wanting to give back, you know, and just following that sort of kind of righteous path, that was always part of our upbringing. So that's really where I think that came from, and my like moral compass really came from her. But then when you see all the other stuff that you see as a young, you know, man of color growing up in the inner city, like you see all those things and you think, do I want to participate in that? Do I want to be the reason somebody else's mom is addicted to drugs? Do I want to be the reason, right, like that there's violence that exists in my community, or so, you know what I mean? Like I've been jumped, I've been, you know what I mean, I've been on the opposite end of a lot of these things. I don't want that for other people. So I think that when you go through things and you see how ugly life can be, the only other way to run is towards something positive. So that's really what drove me.
I feel like going through hardship, man, like it builds empathy in people, you know, like because you deal with you know, the challenges, and once you get past them, you realize how hard things can be. So when you see somebody else going through it, it's like you don't want them to go through it.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot in common, man. Like I don't smoke or drink anymore, but I had to come to that realization like after almost dying. So I give you credit for taking that approach naturally, because I do think that's like our natural form, is just being, you know, purified from all the toxins, man, like whatever it is. It could be sugar or whatever. I mean, I know there's a lot of things in our diets that we eat regardless, but I mean, just having a clear mind for me is like very important. And I didn't have a father growing up either, man. Like, you know, I didn't have my father's name on my birth certificate either. So when he said that, I was like, man, like, I totally understand what you mean by just not having that presence, man. Like it could affect you, you know. It kind of, like, as a father now, like it's the reason why I am the kind of father I am, is because I don't want to have my kids ever feel what it's like to not have a father around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was younger, I was angry a lot.
Me too.
And it was like attributed to just that, right? Like I was so frustrated with my circumstances. I was like, man, like if I had my dad around, like would this be different? You know, like would he be able to check my mom at certain, you know, points in time? Would he be able to provide resources or information for me?
Right.
And I realized along the way, like while I was picking up gems from other people, I had to like become that father for myself and help coach myself through a lot of those decisions. And I had some great mentors. And while I would let them in part of the way, I couldn't let them in all the way. Like I couldn't let anybody play that role because I knew that they weren't. So
Right.
I ended up taking a lot of ownership early, but that was a huge part of the reason why. So I feel you, man, and I know that there's a lot of other like fatherless children who exist out there who are kind of looking for advice or finding ways to connect with people. And I tell them, I'm like, look, when they meet me, when they hear the stuff I'm rapping about, I tell them I'm like, I'm not like the hip hop dad, you know. I'm like your cool uncle who you can come to for advice. You know what I mean? You got any questions about life stuff, about school or career or whatever, you can always just reach out. There's no middle person here. If you need just somebody to talk to about any of the hardships or difficulties, you're not going through it alone. There are other people who've been through some of that stuff before. And
For
even if I
sure.
haven't been through every single thing, you know what I mean? I have resources, I have information I learned along the way. I'm happy to share that stuff. So absolutely, man.
It makes a world of difference just to have somebody say those things, man. And I feel like that's the main reason why I'm doing this podcast is I'm hoping that the kid that you just described is listening and it says, man, like they understand what I'm going through. Let me reach out to Tim or let me reach out to Paul and possibly like make a different choice in that person's life. So I give a lot of respect to you for doing that work, man, because I feel like it's important, and I feel like the more of us that invest in the youth in that manner, man, like we'll have different outcomes, later down the line, man. But we just have to keep investing in them and not give up on them.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to talk to you, man, about your movie. You have a movie called The Wonderland, man, or Wonderland, and I got a quote from it that it was really intriguing to me, and I just want to be able to expand on it, man, because just the idea of it, I feel like could relate to so many people. So you said, or the quote that I got was, "Every neighborhood is a wonderland through the eyes of a child." And to me, like, it kind of blew my mind, the little head exploding emoji. Because I was thinking to myself, like, I didn't grow up in like the nicest neighborhood, but if you would have asked me, like, at any point in my childhood, I would have told you I lived in the best neighborhood in the world.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it's incredible because I think a child's imagination, they don't know what they don't know, right?
yeah,
So for them, they are making the best out of what's right there in front of them. And, for me growing up, I never thought I'd leave my block. I never really thought I'd leave like my neighborhood. Just there was a quarter of a mile stretch where I had everything I needed. Schools, a couple blocks away. The bank, the supermarket was like literally around the corner. The projects were 2 blocks over. The park was up the street. I just felt like, okay, this is like what my life is going to be.
It's my world.
Yeah. And then as I got older and had a chance to see more, I started to travel for school and I left the state and all this stuff. I realized, like life is not really like how I experienced. Like there's more to it, right? That I had a certain kind of perspective because of how I grew up, but not everybody else sees the world the way that I do.
Yeah.
So, I think for me, it was like, man, how incredible would it be to share what it's like to be on the flip side of that? When I think about even the movie Alice in Wonderland, the whole movie is a dream sequence that she had the freedom and the permission to like dream this whole thing, and it became a movie. But in my neighborhood, kids aren't allowed to dream like that.
Right.
And kids all over the world aren't allowed to dream like that. We see what's happening in other countries right now that's like really hot in the news. We see what's happening with just these different kind of global social movements. When you give kids the freedom and permission to dream, their whole trajectory just changes. So that's really what I want people to take away from the film is, it doesn't even matter what the social issue is. Like in the film, we talk about housing and COVID and how all these kind of financial health insecurities are affecting people right now. But, even if the issue was, something completely different, I think utilizing hip hop as that liberation tool, right, is the thing that I think will shift outcomes for a lot of our youth. And hip hop isn't always thought of as that tool. Oftentimes, and like for me growing up, it was go to school, education, your college degree will be the thing. And that's not always the case for people. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's a different key that unlocks people's potential and possibility. So that's what I wanted to show people, was that through hip hop, you can discover this whole kind of new world. And for me, the opportunities that have come up in my life to really build community and these deep relationships with people have been through hip hop. Hip hop has enhanced my professional life and networking and kind of understanding the community better. So for me, that's really what that whole film is about, showcasing to people that this is the real power of hip hop when you harness it in this way, and when you allow people to authentically share their stories and tell their perspective honestly, openly, without judgment. You'd be surprised at what you hear. So yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the chance to kind of see it and pulling that particular quote out.
Yeah, what you just said resonates a lot with me, man, because I feel like, people say it and it probably becomes a little cliche, but like hip hop really saved my life. All of the hardships that I was describing to you a little while ago, I didn't know what to do with them, man. I didn't have any guidance on like how to cope with it, how to process it, how to make sense of it. My mental health was like in shambles at the time. And so I was actually on house arrest and I started writing. I started like, just writing my thoughts and writing my words down. I was listening to hip hop. I was like finding people that I could relate to. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do that too. And before I knew it, man, like I had a whole notebook filled with rhymes and I just, I felt better. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even show anybody for like probably like another year or two after that, but it's just the process of me getting it out of my system and venting. And it's still something that I do to this day, man. I still write and, I still use it as a therapeutic tool, even if I'm not like active in making music as an artist, it's just a part of me now, man. So that really resonates with me. And I totally co-sign everything that you just said, because I feel like regardless of what your outlet is, like as long as you're using it to be productive and to like help yourself, like express yourself, I think that's a very healthy thing for people to get into.
Yeah, and that's why I think hip hop is really this like transformative tool for changing people's lives, because and why it's resonated with people all over the world who don't even speak like English, right? Or anything like that. That doesn't matter. It's like the freedom that comes with self-expression and the power, right, of discovering your voice, through whatever art form you're expressing it through. So even if you're not an MC, right, but if you're an artist, like a graffiti writer, the freedom and liberation that comes with, I get to write, you know what I mean, and throw up on a wall whatever it is that I'm feeling in that moment. If it's just like, I'm proud, I want to throw up my name, cool. If I want to paint this piece that's about the cultural history of my ancestors, cool. You know what I mean? Like they can do that. Dancers the same way, like whatever they're feeling emotionally, whatever story they want to tell with their bodies, they get to do that. A lot of ownership and authenticity and power that comes with that freedom and self-expression, and why I think hip-hop has become the global movement that it's become. And it's something that I think can be used as a tool for liberation. We just haven't fully tapped into all of that here in the United States, with all of the like social constructs and isms that exist. You know what I mean?
What is that? The fifth? What is that? The fifth element of hip hop? What is that? The wisdom, right? The knowledge.
And I'd love to see more hip hop in like education spaces. I want to see it like officially recognized and like taught as a course, or even like those strategies utilized more. I know there are hip hop educators all around the country who are doing more of that, but it's not like an official part of the system. It's an effort from like individuals in this movement. But I want to see it infiltrate like corporate spaces. I want to see it infiltrate the health system, because I think in our government, because I think that the perspective and lens that it brings will create the kind of world that we want, with like, greater equity and better outcomes for people of color, for all people, like all that kind of thing. I think that that's an important part that's been missing for a long time.
Yeah, man, because hip hop is so inclusive. Like it's kind of like, there's not really anything that you can't do in hip hop. If you're willing to like just step forward and express yourself, I mean, the community's there, you know, like you have people that'll embrace you, and you have people that'll like, you know, that'll be your comrade in that same space. So I totally understand what you're saying, man. Like I used to have a vision when I was younger, man, of like something very similar, of like having like, you know, hip hop being like this ultimate tool of like liberation, like how you said, of kids, of adults, of like every age and every background that was willing to like just entertain the idea, man. Just be willing to just entertain the idea, because I guarantee you that there is something in there for you too. Like you will find something to relate to too. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, man, I truly believe that hip hop is a spiritual thing, and it taps into that special part of people that it's very hard to tap into otherwise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that it activates all the senses. And when you're like deeply embedded and ingrained in the culture, you realize that it's not just kind of what you see on TV and radio and social media, right? That there's layers to people and this complexity that exists. And when you dive into those nuances, cultural nuances of hip hop, you know, there's some really special stuff that's there. But you know, we gotta like write and do the research. We gotta publish our own findings and that kind of stuff. It's still such a new culture that just hasn't existed prior to us, but we're seeing the effects and we're documenting the effects and the impact of the culture. So I have friends now who are, you know, master's degrees, working on their PhDs and writing these papers and these reports just about the impact of hip hop culture and what it means in just different spaces of our public lives. So hopefully in the future, you know, that's the kind of stuff that our young people get a chance to study and to read, is about how hip hop really transforms society.
Oh man, that'd be so dope. I mean, if you need help in that, let me know.
Yeah, my friends are way smarter and cooler than me, but I'd love to kind of, you know, introduce you and connect you. Maybe they can be guests on the show in the future.
Oh, that'd be awesome, man. Thank you. I mean, we're kind of touching on community building, and I did want to talk to you about that. I'm just curious, man. Like, my own perspective is that community building is probably like the most important thing that we can do to like ensure, you know, that our kids and everybody else's kids gets a fair chance at things. What do you consider like the main importance of community building, and how do you think that affects the youth?
Yeah. I think that there's like a couple of like proverbs or sayings, right, that I think would be important. Some of them I think are behind me, right? Like the idea of being interconnected, and Lakesh, like Ubuntu, just recognizing that your humanity is tied to other people is an important way to move forward, because then when you make decisions as an individual, you understand how that's connected with the whole, right? Yeah, so
for sure,
your decision as an individual impact your community, right? Where you decide to invest your time, your energy, or even your dollars, right? How you decide to invest your vote back into your community, right? Those are all just important things that come up. But kind of thinking about, I've kind of done some like very minimal research and studying about like African spirituality, and you know, my biggest thing is I think that worldly religions, there are cultural kind of nuances and differences in how they practice, but they all kind of fundamentally come back to some of the same stuff.
Okay.
So when I was looking into like Orishas and this idea of these different elements, right, that kind of govern the world, there was always this idea of balance, right? Like the things that gave life could destroy life, whether it's water, fire, you know, air, etc. And I always thought that was just an interesting thing to think about, that we there's a Native American kind of story about two wolves, right, who are kind of, you know, in conflict with each other. And the wolf that wins is the one that you feed, right? So just that idea of like there's always this kind of battle, this duality. Some people might recognize it as good and evil. I think the world is way too more complicated to think about it just in that sense of dichotomy.
Right.
But I think that when we can see people in their fullness, right? When we can understand that, people can do good things, they can also do, make poor decisions too that negatively impact others. I think that when you take the time to really get to know somebody and really be in community with all of their good, with all of their bad, um, you can then make the best and most informed decisions around how do we move forward. And I think that part of the detriment of our American society and Western culture is this idea that you as an individual are more important or greater than the whole.
Right.
Right? The idea that like, we have all these like hero stories and it's like American mythology about the one individual who like changed everything for everybody. And this is like, that's not how the world works. Not even here. That's not how it worked.
Right.
We just decided to like uplift some individuals more than others. And the rest of the world, that's like not like how that happens. So, I think that when we're doing the community building thing, it's kind of recognizing that no matter what your contribution is, whether you're the politician like a president or you're a poor person, or you live in the projects, you live in the suburbs. It doesn't matter what your background or standing in life. You are equally as important, right? And that for me
sure.
is my like mentality and approach to just community building. I am the same person when I talk to a corporate sponsor, and I go and I speak with like the CEO for Raley's or something like that. As I am then when I go back to like the projects and I speak with a parent who's like, working really hard to get their kids to school, but are dealing with a whole bunch of issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I treat them with the same, level of respect and care that I would want for myself, because the way that I view the world is, we're all connected in our experiences. And the more we can build bridges and connections as opposed to those silos where we all kind of get tunnel vision and focused on our own individual self and story, I think the more we can build those connections, the better off we'll all be, because we can honestly and authentically hear each other's stories, recognize where our needs are, but also where our strengths are, what opportunities exist, because of who we are, because of our strengths. Right. So I think it's a different way of like viewing the world. But for me, I think that that's the important key for showing up, is understanding that not everybody's going to be perfect. But if you can meet people where they're at, you can really shift some things.
Yeah, it sounds like you're just recognizing the humanity in everybody and kind of letting that be the thing that helps you define somebody, as opposed to maybe their identity or how they might identify with themselves. It sounds like you're just kind of like identifying their humanity first and then saying like, hey, I want you to recognize my humanity too. And then we can find somewhere in there has to be something in common, because we're both going through a lot of similar things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is people don't get recognized here, right? Like when you prop up a few people, right? And whether that's like economically, social standing, or whatever it is, when it's just like the few people are like the idea of celebrity, the special few, then it makes everybody else feel like they're not, and
who am I?
This is not true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that is like the wall that I hope to kind of break down. It's like, like, you are special, you have something to offer, but whatever your 100% is, that's not going to be the same as somebody else's 100%. Right? Like your gifts and talents are unique and special to you, and that's a different set of gifts than what somebody else may have been given, right? So yeah, man, I just think it's important to help people really recognize that, really build people up from their self-esteem and how they view themselves and how they view others, and that kind of thing. And then I think that we'll see a lot less of some of the negative things that we see, the ugly side that we see.
Yeah, I'm curious, man. Like, in your process of dealing with different kinds of communities, because I know I've experienced it. Have you seen people that are like from the same community, but like you find some people that are proud of their community, and then other people that are ashamed of their community and don't want to like really, help rebuild or help, like contribute in any way? What do you think is like the thing that kind of creates that divide between the same people from the same community, but then you have ones that are like, F this, and the other ones are like, nah, we need to do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, whether you're from the hood or the suburbs, like, I just don't believe that like places, are like I don't believe like the hood is a place to escape. I think that it's a place to grow,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that even in like suburbs or more rural communities too, I know there's a lot of people who are like, this is such a small town, or this is a place I need to escape from. Um, but I think about the opportunity that exists there to grow that place, right? And it's not everybody is called or feels that sense of responsibility to a place, right? For them, a change of scenery and circumstances might be exactly what they need,
Right.
right? Like for me, I didn't think about life outside of my neighborhood. It wasn't until I had a chance to see it that I began to really understand it. So I'm not saying that people should be in one spot forever. Um, but I think about how there's a real opportunity for people to um, think about their community as a place to invest in, as a place to grow it, as a place to create opportunity and connection, um, as opposed to a place that they are completely dismissive of, right? Even if it wasn't the greatest, experience growing up, I think that there might be an opportunity, and it might not be right away. You might need some of that separation, but maybe 10, 15, 20 years later, right, you have an opportunity to kind of come back and kind of rethink about what life could potentially look like in that community, if it's even the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I was fortunate enough to go back and serve at my elementary school during the times when my community kind of felt like it was the same. 10 years later, 15 years later from that moment in time, my community looks and feels very different. Not as many people still own their own homes. A lot of the businesses have been bought out. The international supermarket where people get their like fruits and vegetables from the islands, that got bought out and became a Whole Foods. You know
Oh
what I
wow.
mean? Like there were so many things that shifted and changed that my neighborhood doesn't always feel the same. There are certain
Mm-hmm.
places that do, but they even changed the name of the projects. You know what I mean? Like so, like as an effort to like rebrand the community, I respect it, but I think that there's a lot of that like historical legacy and culture that gets lost. Now, some people might think that's a good thing. There are certain parts of that story we don't want to keep, but I also think that if we're not honest about our full story, right? If we try to pretend like that didn't exist or that place never happened, then we're not being real with ourselves about what the issues are, right? If it was just kind of rebranding a name only and not let's actually rebrand these conditions, let's change these conditions to
Yeah.
change outcomes, then we're not doing our job. So yeah, man, I just think that some of those things are important, that if you you know if you need that separation, I'm not judging you for it. That's go do what you need to do for yourself. But there will be people who are called to go back, right, and to find a way to make it better. And if you have it in your heart to support those people, then do that instead. If it can't be you, you know that there will be other people. Support them instead.
Yeah. I think that kind of touches on something else I wanted to talk to you about is, just having the mentality of being able to shape your world. And how do you think we can like empower young men to realize that they do have the ability to shape their own worlds?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it starts with building up the esteem of young men and
Yeah.
helping them understand what their power looks like.
Yeah.
I didn't have a serious conversation about leadership until I was an adult. I didn't have any language for it. Like I couldn't have told you, right, like any of that stuff. And I think that there's this expectation that leadership is just it's just something you have or you're born with, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
Right? The captains of the sports teams were always the best athletes. They weren't always the best leaders.
Right.
And sometimes it's not the like most talented individual performer who is like kind of the heart and soul of the team, the person who can really inspire and motivate others. And I think that was an important lesson I learned from sports. I didn't have language for it until much later in my life. So I think that, it's important, before even understanding the ways that you can change your world, right? Your outer world, it's understanding who you need to become as a person and as a leader, and kind of shifting your inner world before you change your outer world. I think that's where we start, and then we can get to the other stuff.
Oh man, I like how you put that, man, because I'm a firm believer in nothing else is going to change until that internal dialogue is in the right spot.
That's it.
I always tell people, man, like this idea of being a grown man is not a destination, it's a journey. We're all gonna be working on ourselves for the rest of our lives. I mean, nobody's got it all figured out, and if somebody tells you that they do, I mean, walk the other way, because it sounds like something's going to be solved pretty soon. But I just.
Oh, my bad. I'm cutting you off because I wanted to add this piece. I put out an album in 2015, right? And it's like 22 tracks or something like that online. It's called Rough Draft. And it's exactly that idea, right? That we're all works in progress. Mm-hmm. And what's dope about it is like there's like the A side to the album, the first like 13 tracks, which are an opportunity for people to kind of hear where I was reflecting in my like young adult life and the music I was creating, things I was thinking about. But then the B side to the album, 14 through 22, are all songs that I wrote when I was like 17, 18, 19, right? And when I was coming of age and really understanding who I was. So it's a cool opportunity, I think, to like explore that idea. But it's exactly what you said, man. Like, this is not a sprint. You're not going to get to the end of this. Like, you are always going to grow and develop and change along the way. So I appreciate you saying that.
Oh man, I you gave me chills, man. I think it's just a really important theme, because I notice within myself, with other people that are around me, that having this like internal calendar and having this like idea of like I'm supposed to be a certain way can be pretty strong, and I to be quite honest, man, like there are people within the hip hop community too that they think that they're supposed to be a certain way as an MC, or they're supposed to be a certain way as whatever you want to put that name under. And I just encourage people to just try to be your authentic self. If that authentic self is that thing, then I mean, more power to you. But if that authentic thing is something other than that, I mean, you might want to reevaluate and just really embrace that thing that is inside of you, because there's only one you, man. Like, there's only one you. Like, just own it and be proud of it and embrace it, man, and start from there, because like Paul said, this is just a rough draft, and you have the ability, and it's not, none of it is written in stone and none of it is written in pen. It's all stuff that we can change along the way, as long as you recognize it and as long as you're willing to make the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with Rocky and Natalie with youth in the juvenile hall, and that's the biggest message that we try to convey. It's that idea of, you are not your worst mistake. The worst day of your life doesn't have to define you. And, there's a way for you to continue to be and to find some of that peace and to really work to better yourself, better your community, no matter where you're at. So, kind of letting them know that, it starts with your inner self, and then, you start to see some of that stuff change around you, no matter what your situation is. But, we want to see those young people not end up incarcerated for long periods of time. So we try to have those honest conversations with them about who they actually are, who they want to be.
Yeah, man. I feel like I'm a perfect example, because I almost got locked up for like, 3 sentences. I was looking at 3 sentences that were 15 to life. And I was like, I was a mess, bro. Like I was on drugs. I was, drinking a lot, living just a foul lifestyle, man. And I was this close, man, this close to just going away for the rest of my life. And then I decided that I didn't want it anymore. And I decided that it wasn't serving my purpose because I knew deep down inside, like I wanted to do something great with my life. And I wasn't going to be able to do it just doing the things that I was doing. So I turned everything around, man, got back in school, got sober. And now I have my CPA license and I'm, living my best life, man. But I'm still not fulfilled because I still want to keep helping, So to any of you youngsters out there that are listening, man, like even if you've made mistakes, like it's never too late. You can always turn things around, and if you need to, talk to somebody, if you want to ask questions, if you want to continue this dialogue, man, just reach out to the email address that's in the description below. But before we get going, Paul, man, like I just really want to thank you and just taking your time and giving us some of your gems and talking to us about your background. Is there anything else that you would like to contribute or anything else you would like to say to any of the youngsters out there that are listening?
Yeah, you know what? I think the last thing I'll share is that, anybody in my network is open and available to you, right? And I think that
including me.
Right. I think that that's an important piece because sometimes people will think, oh, well, you had that success or those people, good for you, right? And like that doesn't involve me. And I'm like, no, like my journey involves connecting you, right, with whatever it is that your purpose is or wherever you're trying to get to in your life. That's part of my mission. If I can help connect the dots for you somewhere, then absolutely that's what I want to do. I met people in all places in their life and who are doing really cool and interesting things all over the country. And what's dope about the film is I get to take it across the country and now do these virtual screenings, whereas before I might have had to like travel or plan a tour and it would have been really expensive. But now it's like, hey, like let's figure out this Zoom thing. Nice. But it's a really cool opportunity, I think, to help bring those resources back to our community here in Sacramento and say like, hey, I met somebody from the Harvard Graduate School Education today. I met these folks who've been dancing since when hip hop started. You know what I mean? I've met people in London or Korea or, my friend is a DJ and an English teacher in Japan, like, meeting people all around the world who are doing cool things, who all have this love and passion for hip hop and for building up, other people. That I think is a really cool asset. So if folks need to reach out to me for whatever, right, then, I'm down to have a conversation. People want to see the film, people want to hear more of the music, like whatever it is, or if you just want to get connected with just like what's happening here in the community, I'm down to, be a resource and an asset. So,
well, Paul, let them know where they can reach you, man. Drop your social media or whatever other contact information you have. And then just so people know, man, I'm going to drop the links in the comment below, in the description below. I mean, so you'll be able to reach out to Paul in multiple ways.
Yeah. Everything is just Paul Willis is hip hop. That's my like Instagram handle. My email account is paulwillisishiphop@gmail.com. It's my Cash App. It's my Venmo. It's everything. So everything is branded across the board. But when you reach out to me, you're not getting my manager. You're not getting like a third person. You know what I mean? You get me directly. So if you DM me on Instagram, you message me on Facebook, I'm going to respond to you directly. So just know that. And I look forward to connecting with you.
Well, Paul Willis, man, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your sharing your story, man, and a lot of respect and a lot of props going out to you for doing the work that you're doing, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. This was amazing. I really appreciate your podcast and these grown man sessions. I think that there's so many gems in here. So I hope that more and more folks get a chance to see it. I know I'm going to share it. So I look forward to it.
Right on. Thank you, man. I always end the show by saying that one person can change the world, but it's one person at a time, and that one person is you. And until the next time, peace out. This is Grown Man Sessions. If you got anything from us today, anything, just please hit the like and subscribe and tell a friend, man. But until next time, peace out, you guys. Later, Paul.
Peace.